Thank you everybody for joining today. I'm going to jump right into it. I am not as savvy on the webinars as Dan is. You know, he's a little bit more professional than I am, but I'll do my best, and we'll try to provide some value for you as you attend today. So first thing I want to talk about is how to build, obviously, is how to build your CapEx budget. So there's a couple factors that go into determining this, and different people look at it from different perspectives. You know, and you can look at it from a perspective of design, right? And you can start from that point, and that could be a good thing. You want it to look the best, right? And you think that's going to sell the best. Or you can look at it from strictly a cost basis, neglecting design, and maybe you think that's the best process. And so it's just about the dollar and the return. You know, I think that it's kind of a blend of both, but there's a process to it. And when the designer comes in, when the budget comes in, and when you involve, if you have a third-party manager, when you involve your manager. So I'm going to try to share my screen here, and I'm going to, let's see here. All right. Everybody see the screen over here? It should be a spreadsheet, and has a bunch of property names. Now this is a real rent matrix, but I've changed the names of to protect the innocent. So these are deals that we've actually underwritten. But if somebody can type in the chat, make sure we can and see that before I go through this. And pretty much what I'm looking at here, what we're talking about is we call this a rent matrix. Thank you, Chris and Mohammed. This is a rent matrix. So we work with our property managers when we're looking at a property to determine where our property falls in regards to other comp properties. This is common. Obviously, we're looking at a couple different things. We're looking at location. Is it in the sub-market that our property is located in? Is it the same vintage and the same year build, same number of units, same class of property, class A, class B? You know, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. Once we do that, we determine what our pro forma rents can be. Recommended rate, you see on this far side over here, this is our recommended rate, okay? So we start at this point. This is the number one place where we start. We're working on other things in the meantime, obviously, but not pertaining to CapEx. We're working on expenses and operating expenses, all the rest. So you see here, we have a asking rent, average asking rent right here of 702. Okay. And then a recommended rate of 790. And recommended rate, that's based on what all our comps are achieving. So the reason this is important when talking about CapEx, and I'll just kind of scroll down and you can see what we're comparing: 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, studios, the mix. Let me expand some of these. The number of units of each type, average square footage. This is important because it's going to get your effective or average effective rent per square foot. So that's going to make sure you're priced within the market. Okay. And then we're looking at the comps to see if they're renovated or not. Okay. Look, you see here, we got some partial renovations on this subject property. Okay. All right. So that's what we call a rent matrix. And you can work, if you're not using a third-party manager, you know, this is simply, you can get online, you can call the properties, you can go physically to the properties, but you need this information, and this is why. The first step in building a CapEx budget is to determine how much room you can move in the market with your rents based on like, kind, and quality comps. Okay, because no matter what you want to do to a property in terms of CapEx, whether it be renovating the clubhouse or, you know, putting in granite or, you know, putting in smart home, you got to know how much rent you can achieve, how much increase in rent you can achieve before you can set your budget. Okay, so once you've done that, once you get that rent matrix, that'll tell you. So let's just say on average, we can achieve, you know, $150 additional rents per unit, okay, on average. All right, the next step we want to do is go and find out what amenities these comps actually have, because that was just kind of their unit mix. It was the rent, but now I need to know what do they have in the units, in their units, that they're achieving those higher rents than I am. So I want to make sure I'm not putting stuff that is not really going to achieve those rents. So I'm going to pull up another spreadsheet here. Give me 1 second. And okay, let me share the screen again. All right. So this is just an example. They come in all different kinds of formats, but we're wanting to figure out what kind of amenities they have over here in this far right column, how tall the ceilings are, what kind of cabinets they have, what kind of countertops, what kind of flooring, fixtures, all kinds of stuff. We use software, most of you are familiar with the software called CoStar. And we can get a lot of those photos right from that. So it's a very useful tool to keep us from driving all the way through. But this is what we call phone call rental comps, and just document all this stuff. Here's the phone numbers, how much the effective rents are, and the different fees they charge to make sure they're not built into that rent that we already looked at in the rent matrix, because they could be advertising a certain rent, but it may include some of these fees right here. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at the true rent and not fees built into it. All right. So that's step number 2. So number 1, you want to do your rent comp analysis, see what you can achieve. What's the ceiling? Where's the maximum you can go in the like kind of properties? You don't want to be number 1. You don't want to be the leader. We like to be number 3, if possible, in the market. That way we're not the leader. We're not having to, break all the water for everyone else. So be about number 3 in the market. Figure out what the delta is between what the subject property is achieving in rents and what the market is yielding in rents. And that gives you your increase in rents per unit. Okay. And then we looked at next the type of amenities or what each unit has. And so we can now start looking at individual line items in our units to determine what is going to work on our property. So I'm going to pause for a brief second. I know that's a lot of information. I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions at this time, take a little break and just kind of catch people up. So we've got the question and answer box. Just type in any questions that you have, and I'll keep going on down the line. But I just want to give everybody a chance to ask questions. As Dan always says, I talk more than him, and I tend to talk fast. So if anybody wants me to review anything, just let me know, and we'll go over that. So you can look at the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and type your questions there. So one thing, and I apologize, I couldn't find this sheet for us today because I changed the formatting of it. But what you want to do in your markets that you're looking at, you want to determine each item and how much increase in rent each item will give to you. When I say that, I mean new appliances, okay? How much can I increase rent in my submarket for putting in new appliances? Maybe that's $50. It's gonna vary per market, but you need to come up with a spreadsheet. So like, I'm gonna go over these real quick. Appliances, flooring, countertops, cabinets, plumbing fixtures, light fixtures, paint. Okay, that's just your general run of the mill. If you can get into actual demo and change the floor plans if you want, but those are the basic ones. And then assign a dollar amount that rent, and work with your property managers to determine those. The spreadsheet's available for us to copy. I can try to get some formats of those out. I'll run those back through Dan and Melissa, but I'll check on that for you. I'm not 100% sure what formats they have through the MFIN. Let me see. As your GAT, let's see. just reading these questions. As you're gathering all this information, what spreadsheets and other tools do you use to keep yourself organized? So these are the basic spreadsheets that I'm showing here that we kind of go over. So there's 3 basic ones. And just so everybody knows, we use a system called Airtable. I'm not going to pull it up because it has some of our current deal flow and it's confidential information in there. But we use Airtable. We have each of the deals in there, and then I can load all of these documents into Airtable and, and can change them and keep them in one location, and all of us have access to that deal. So I can put notes in there. Danny or Dan can put in notes, if we're working on underwriting, or, I met with the broker and I have some feedback, I'll go ahead and put those into the notes and everybody's up to date. So that's the system that we use right now to kind of keep organized on our level. As far as resources, again, we use CoStar. That's a big one. You can get all your comp information from that down to the finest detail. So that, I would definitely recommend that software. And then I just upload these spreadsheets to that and keep them updated. All right. Without CoStar, what other ways to identify unit characteristics without going to specific properties? You can get on, just online, just Googling the property, and they're going to, apartments.com is going to have that. CoStar owns some of those sub companies, and so they're feeding some of the higher level information to those websites to help you get some of that. And you can just do it by looking at like Google Photos. If you type in the property and just scroll through, you're going to see like, oh, that one has granite. I see that. But you want to confirm all that information. Even if you're using CoStar, pick up the phone, call the property and ask, hey, what are your rent specials today? Okay, and is that on a renovated? Looks like, I see online that you got some units with granite and some with Formica or laminate tops. Is that rent price that you just gave me, is that for the renovated unit or is that for the unrenovated unit? And they'll tell you, just pretend to be a prospective tenant and get that information. That is you want to confirm that information no matter what system you use. Let's see. Okay, being that you typically do not want to own the property that's achieving the highest rents in the market, are there any instances where you'd make an exception to that rule, or do you always aim to be somewhere around third? We do not make an exception to that rule because that's just risky. Because there may be an anomaly in there where that person's achieving it. Maybe they're in just a little bit better location than you, or like right off the highway, or there's a job source right there. And so that's why they're able to get, they're more in demand maybe. Maybe it's just a touch newer. And so it's just risky, like I said, there just may be a caveat why they're able to achieve that. And if I underwrite on that, the highest, I have no room for error. And so you want to under commit, over deliver always. Remember, we're syndicating. We have other people's money that we're watching out for. We do not want to underwrite risky. We want to underwrite conservatively. We want to be as sure as possible that we can achieve what we set out to achieve. And the best way to do that is to remain second, third in the market. So that I would definitely say there's no real exception to that rule. Let me look here. Okay, so the next question will bring me into the next section. If we can raise the rents by $100 a month, what is the max CapEx budget? Okay, so that is what I started to talk about coming up with that list. I'm going to go over that again. It's going to be appliances, cabinets, countertops, flooring, paint, plumbing fixtures, light fixtures. Okay, so now we're just only talking unit renovations. We're not talking amenities or anything like that, like updating the clubhouse, because I can't associate that directly with rent increase. You can, but it's not tangible. So I'm going to focus more on per unit renovations. Okay, so have those factors, and then you can do research on the properties that have done value adds. You can talk to your property manager. If you don't have a property manager, do some research. and see what other properties are achieving by and what they did to achieve those. And you can kind of come up with those. So for instance, maybe backsplash is an increase of $25 per month, or maybe in your market, it's only, people don't really care about that. It's only $15 per month. And I didn't mention backsplash. Backsplash is another big one that people like. Granite, maybe in that submarket or in that vintage class, people don't really care about granite. And so you can only get like $25. And so for each of those line items, you're going to put a dollar amount. Let's say new appliances. Let's say you can get $50 extra a month. Let's say your cost is, $2,000 for a new set of appliances. So now you're able to calculate ROI, your return on investment. So I'm spending $2,000 and I'm able to increase my rent by $50. Now remember, we have a maximum cap that we can increase rents. So we want to pick and choose which items will get us to that maximum rent that we can achieve for the lowest amount of money. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. So we have the list of items: appliances, countertops, cabinets, backsplash, flooring, plumbing fixtures, light fixtures, paint. Each of those will give you a certain return on investment, or a certain increase per month in rents per unit. And each one has a cost associated with it. And so you want to pick the items that will get you to that rent increase, the maximum rent increase for the lowest amount of money. But you also have to weigh in, what people want. So I'm going to give you again a quick rundown. Let me pull up another spreadsheet. And again, I've changed the names to protect the innocent. Let me, okay. So this is a CapEx kind of overview that we do while we're still in the underwriting phase. And again, just to bring everybody up to speed, we're doing all this pre-contract or pre-even being awarded, because we want to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row and our pencils are as sharp as possible on our underwriting. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to possibly lose a deal, not get awarded the deal. We look at hundreds of deals a year, and, we get a handful of those, but that's part of due diligence, the pre-purchase due diligence, and, being careful with our investors' money. We want to make sure we're putting in the work. So to go over this spreadsheet, so look right here at the top, average rent increase. Okay. That's what we can achieve. All right, I'm just going to go down through these and just show you. These are going to vary, so don't get stuck on the numbers here, because I can get some of this stuff for cheaper and some of it's more expensive. So this is just for for reference. But granite countertops, okay, $2,700, and let's say it can achieve $50, and you can put that out to the side. $50 rent increase. Kitchen sink, let's say $5 rent increase, plumbing fixtures, let's say 15, we'll go down through all these and see what all of them are, and then sum them up, and then pick the ones that we feel are most important. And this is a conversation we have as managing partners, the three of us. We go through and we pick which items are going to be the most important. Like, for instance, toilets. Okay. Is that really going to be a deal breaker? You got to put yourself in the mind of your prospective tenants. If they walk into a unit and they're looking around, okay, to live there, put yourself in their shoes. Are you going to not rent a unit for the price they're asking because the toilets aren't chair height, or what we call ADA toilets? Or are you going to be more concerned about granite countertops? What is going to draw you to pay the rent that's being asked there? What's going to draw you to that neighborhood? So you kind of have to go through this. Is the flooring in place? Is it old, nasty builder grade carpet, or is it, decent laminate or vinyl flooring that really is not that bad? And so, to spend, $800 per unit, it's not going to make that big of a difference. So those are things that you want to kind of factor in as you're going through this. So we go through this line by line. We have a discussion, usually takes a couple hours. We hash out what we're going to do. And then this kind of gives us a basic budget. Again, these numbers change based on the market. So again, don't get hung up in that. And we're going to come up with our budget. And then here is going to be the total number of units. So if you look, here's our total number of units up here. This is the total cost. And then our total CapEx budget. Here's our per unit budget, which equals this one. So here's the per unit breakdown. Okay. And then we're just multiplying this by 270. And here's your return on investment, annual per unit rent increase. Okay. So let's say you're increasing by $150. You know, your average rent increase is $1,800, annual rent increase. Total times the 270 units is 486,000. And again, I know there's a lot of info. So this is just for reference. Don't get held up in the numbers. I'm just trying to show you how we come up with it. And this is your different cap rates, you know, so if you're, and I do want to point this out, but before I get into the cap rate discussion, I want to go look at the questions because I know we've gone over a lot of stuff again, in a really quick fashion. So again, here's a rough breakdown of how we come up with it. We have already determined our average rent increase that we can achieve based on the market. Again, that was from the rent matrix and calling around to the different properties. Once we've done that, we go through and assign a value per each item and how much we can increase the rent per each item. And then we eliminate ones that we feel are unnecessary, like toilets. We come up with our total budget, and here's our return on investment. Okay, so I'm going to go to the questions real quick. And okay, so yeah, I assume all these items are done at the acquisition phase. I'm going to stop share real quick so you can see. Is there a fixed OI that consists the max CapEx? Not real clear on that terminology, the OI that constrains the max CapEx. So the max CapEx, you know, I mean, that's where your other numbers. So yeah, to answer that question, your max CapEx is constrained by your actual deal. So the other factors or KPIs that I was talking about in the beginning, the operations, the debt service, you know, the other income, all of that factors into the returns on the investor. So the returns to the investors, what kind of debt you can get, you know, is this going to be bridge? Is it going to be agency? What's your LTV or LTC? All of those factors play out. And if the deal is less cash flowing, you have to raise more equity, you know, the less it makes sense. Okay. So your CapEx budget is going to be determined partially by all those other factors about your expenses and your other income items such as valet, trash, washer and dryer, amenity rents, you know, your pest control fees, all those sorts of things, all your cash flow, your debt service. But I don't want to get too far into that. That's going to be, that ranges deal to deal exponentially. And based on what you're trying to do as a person, are you JV? That's going to differ, you know, what kind of, are you syndicating? Are you buying, you know, fourplex? All of that's going to differ across the board, but you know, your specific deal and the returns you're wanting to achieve are what's going to constrain the max CapEx, if that makes sense. The system is applicable to the hotel industry as well, correct? Yeah, I would say to an extent. We don't really get into that. You know, we've looked at some hotel stuff. I'm glad I'm not in that right now. But it does apply. It's the same basic principle. You look around and see what other hotels are achieving on their per night rate and what they have and what's drawing people to that hotel. You know, I know that's a big factor for me when I'm looking at hotels is what it looks like on the inside. So yeah, it does definitely change over. Very new to real estate, would be willing to explain how this subject fits into the grand scheme of things. So this is a high level explanation. CapEx, I probably should have started with this. I'm assuming everybody knows the terminology, and I apologize for not kind of explaining that on a high level. So we're going to buy a property. We're looking at where it is compared to the rest of the market, of the other properties. Did the previous owner, the person that's selling it right now, the person that we're looking to sell, that getting to sell it to us, have they neglected to improve the property, or are they lagging in rents? Or were they scared maybe to increase rents because they want to maintain occupancy, or they just couldn't achieve those rents because they weren't doing renovating the property? They didn't want to put the capital in. Maybe they didn't have the capital to improve the property. Any of those factors can play in. So what we're doing is looking at the value add aspect, where we can add value to increase rents. And in this particular webinar, we're talking about physical value add. Physical meaning drywall or granite, flooring, cabinets, things like that. So that value add is what we call our capital expense, okay, our CapEx. And we're trying to come up with our CapEx budget to know what kind of returns we can get on our CapEx. Okay, so again, our value add is what we're doing. Our CapEx is how much it costs, and our ROI is our return on investment. In other words, how much rent increase can we achieve by implementing the value add with the CapEx budget? I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, repeat the items to determine rent increase increments and appliances. And you may have heard me repeat that again a couple times, but appliances, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, countertops, cabinets, backsplash, flooring, paint. That's the basic stuff right there that kind of encapsulate everything, unless you're going to tear out walls, replace windows, and do all that kind of crazy stuff, which if you're doing that, you're pretty heavy into it. You should know what you're doing already. So do that. All right. So far we've actually looked at 3 spreadsheets. I know we said 2, and I just pulled up the third. So, and we do use a couple others, but these are the 3 main ones. So hope that answers that question. How do I estimate the cost of upgrades? I'm going to get into that a little bit on the next webinar that I'm doing, which is 2 weeks from today. And I'm going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of CapEx or value add. I'm going to talk about vertical integration, supply chain. That plays a big factor into it. But let's just say, you're just going to use contractors. You can go to your property manager. They usually have a list of contractors they use in the area. They're familiar with the market. Go to them first. If you're already vertically integrated, that is, you do it all yourself. Okay. You're the guy up and down. You're the guy or the girl up and down. You're vertically integrated. Okay. Then you're going to get bids from contractors. Always get 3 bids and always compare the scope. Make sure the scope, that is the scope is the description of work to be completed. Make sure that you have a scope in the bid, because you could look at one estimate and it's like, let's just say it's $150,000 to do whatever. And the next one's $300,000. You're like, oh, that guy's crazy. I can't believe they would charge me $300,000 to do that. But what you didn't look at was the scope of work, maybe. And so you look at the scope of work and make sure you're comparing apples to apples, and make sure that what company A says they're going to do is equal to what company B says they're going to do. And that may be the difference in the price. So, and then you can go back and say, hey, company A, I noticed you didn't have X, Y, and Z on this estimate. Can you go ahead and include that in there? And then you may see those prices come closer together. But always get 3 bids. Always, always, always get 3 bids, because you have nothing to compare it against. All right, I'm going to hold on the questions for right now. I'm going to jump back in and talk a little bit about cap rate. Okay, cap rate is kind of as a buzzword in our industry. And everybody's like, oh, low cap rates are bad. High cap rates are good. You want to buy, back in the day, it was, 9 cap rate or whatever. Now, if you buy a 9 cap rate, it's probably burnt to the ground when you're buying it. So, in your metro markets, you're usually, between 5.5 and 4.5. I'm going to go with that big range. It's usually closer to 4.5 to 5 cap rate. But I want to show you something, and some of you may have already noticed this. If I buy at a 4.5 cap rate, which some people say is bad. Oh, you bought at a low cap rate. That's, man, you overpaid. They're going to use that terminology. Well, look at my return on investment on a 4.5 cap versus a 5.5 cap or a 7 cap. So the positive thing about buying at a low cap rate, as long as cap rates don't expand during your hold period, is you get a greater return on investment. Okay, so I just want to point that out to people. And I also want to point out a couple other items that are exterior. We also add these on. So maybe you want to paint the buildings, redo some stuff, update the clubhouse. These can't be necessarily quantified in rent increases. What these are is sellable features. So when somebody comes to the property and they come into the clubhouse, that's their first impression of the property. Because, they can't see into every single unit. They're not walking all over the place. The first thing they see, the first impression they get, the first feel, the first nuance, the first mood, if you will, of the property is the clubhouse and some of the amenities, the pool space or the fitness center. It's not necessarily that that's going to make them rent or not. It's just setting the tone for the tour. Okay. So these things are important. I cannot say, oh, if you renovate the clubhouse, you can get another $100 per rent. I can't say that, but what I can say is your closure rate may increase. The number of pieces of traffic that come on the property per day, let's say you have 3 pieces of traffic per day, and your close rate, I think, will be higher. I say I think because it's not guaranteed, if you have nicer amenities. So you want to look at those and don't dismiss those just because you can't increase the rents per month. You also run my mouth now for a good bit, so let's go back to the questions. How much do you underwrite for unforeseen or unknowns? There's always unknowns, but so that's something that we call operating reserves. And that's for the property as a whole, because in renovations at this level, these are mostly cosmetic renovations. So it's not like you're tearing a wall apart and you're going to figure out that the wiring, you got to reroute the wiring or something like that. These are, we're just taking out the laminate countertop, putting on granite, or taking out the cabinet and putting in new cabinets. So it's very cosmetic. It's not structural. And so when that happens, you run into very less unforeseen items. We do obviously underwrite a little bit of sway in there because what can happen during a project like this is you can run into supply chain issues. We had back last year some anti-dumping issues going on with China and the trade, and a lot of the cabinets were coming in from China, or a lot of the materials. And so a lot of the US companies were fighting that battle, which was increasing the cost. So let's say you bid a project at the beginning of the year, and then there was a trade war and tariffs increased, and therefore your import products went up. But you bid it at this low price and didn't account for any kind of sway. That's going to be a problem. All right. Most of the time, if you're using contractors, however, and you're not buying the products yourself, that's their problem, not your problem. So you're going to get a signed contract with the vendor, and they're going to, they're going to be locked into that price for a specific time period. All right. But as far as capital reserves, you want to have those anyways. Operating reserves, just in case, you hit like a COVID-19 or you have some rent snafus that go on. You want to make sure you have reserves for that. But that doesn't always just pertain to value add or capital expense. How do you underwrite more extensive CapEx issues like updating plumbing, electrical, roof, HVAC? Well, that's going to be a bid item, and I can't really associate any of those to a rent increase like we were talking about with these cosmetics, because the tenant is not going to know that you redid the wiring. They're not going to know that you redid the HVAC. I mean, they may feel the difference, but unless you tell them, and they're not going to say, oh, I'm willing to pay $50 extra for, new ductwork in the ceiling. but that may need to be done if you're buying a property with some deferred maintenance. That's just going to be a capital expense that cannot be associated with rent increase. And the only way to do that is to get bids on that. And again, just get 3 bids. But I can't calculate that the way we were kind of calculating the rest of the items there. Another question: if you're buying your first multifamily apartment complex and going through a broker in a competitive process, when should you bring in a property manager to help you evaluate the property? Can you do it pre-LOI? Yes, 1,000 times yes. We involve the property manager immediately. And we get them to provide what's called a pro forma. Okay, so we want to know what are their payroll expenses going to be? What do they think, how many people do they think they're going to need on the site? Because they're the ones that are going to be running it. And you don't want to come up with a pro forma. We come up with a pro forma, but we do not show it to the property managers. We let them come up with it independently. We compare it to ours and see how it stacks up and see where we can make adjustments or where we need to. But I involve your third-party property manager immediately in this process. And because they know that, remember, this is what they do day in and day out. You are an operator, or you are a real estate investor, or you are a syndicator. You may or may not be a property manager. So utilize the professionals that you have on hand to provide that information for you. And they'll do a lot of the legwork. They're happy to do so if they're going to get your business. So, and we do that all the time. That's the first email that I make when I'm starting to underwrite a property. So good question there. How do you figure out the benefit each update will add? For example, light fixtures add 20 to monthly rent. That's a per market discussion. Like I said, there's just some markets that different things, you may have a market or sub-market in a metro area, because like, let's just say Charlotte, for instance, Charlotte is not just Charlotte. There's North Charlotte, or there's, South Charlotte, or East, West, outside the loop, inside the loop. Each one of those is different income base, different type of tenant. And you want to make sure that you're looking at it per that sub-market. And so one, you may have a class A, in a certain part of Charlotte that, may want stainless appliances, and that's just what's the trend right then. And you may go to another part and, they want something else. So work with your property manager, do your research with your comp properties and see what they're doing. And you'll be able to break that down. How does one figure out how much rent increases by new cabinets and countertops versus new flooring? Okay, so that's generally what I was just saying there. It's just going to depend on the submarket. Cabinets, usually that's going to be an older product. Most of the time you can just replace the faces of the cabinets and the doors, and you can leave the boxes up. And that's going to be a lot cheaper than reconfiguring the cabinets for a couple of reasons. You have more waste, more demo time. You got more design time, more lead time getting the cabinets to you, just overall increase in cost. So if you can get away with just replacing the doors and painting the boxes, maybe replacing some of the drawer slides and hardware, then you may be better off. And we always look to that first. Again, it's achieving. So let's say we had a cabinet thing line item in our budget, and it said cabinets increase of $50 per month. And we were saying, okay, we could replace the door fronts or replace the cabinets. Replace the door fronts, let's just say, is $1,000, or actually it'd be less than that. Let's say it's $800. Replacing the cabinets is going to be $1,200. Both look about the same because we're replacing the doors. Nobody really is, going to be like, oh, it looks like this is an old face frame, so we can achieve the rent increase for a lower amount. That's what we're going after. That's a higher ROI, in other words. So, but again, on the flooring, it just depends. Like if you have carpet throughout, you're probably going to want to put down some hard surface flooring. It just lasts longer. It's more pet friendly. It's more modern. It's more appealing. But if it already has, like I said, a decent vinyl on the floor and you can get away with leaving it, then put that money into cabinets instead, or whatever else that market is demanding, if that makes sense. The spreadsheets, again, I'll follow up on those and see if we can get a copy of those out to you. Some of those are proprietary, but some I'm sure we can get you a format on that, but I'll follow up on that. Does this cost include labor? The cost, the individual line costs, I'm going to go back to that spreadsheet and share that. So these costs include labor. This labor right here is like demo or like general labor. So each one of these includes the labor. Okay, but don't get hung up too much on these prices because these can vary. In some markets I can get granite for $1,000, not $2,700. And in some markets I can get appliances for $1,500. So it varies, and it depends on what kind of granite or what kind of apartment complex. If it's a Class A and you need some marble or something like that, or some quartz, this may be the number on your granite. But yes, these do include the labor in those, and this again is like a demo labor. Okay. Labor per category type. Yeah, again, I just answered that. Do you make a decision to do or not to do a CapEx improvement based on ROI of that, years to pay back calculation, or both? It's really about, it's really both, because we have a certain hold time for our property, whether it's going to be 5 years. And another factor in this is your stabilization time. That's the amount of time it's going to take you to complete the value add and achieve the highest rents that you said you can achieve. So let's say your effective rents were $750, you're going to reach $950. You're going to have a value add budget of $5,700 per unit. And you have 270 units, and it's going to take you 18 months to complete all those units. And I won't get too much in the weeds on how you come up with that timeline, but because we're focused on the budget part of it here, but that's all factored in. Can you turn them that quickly? Because you could do them all in 6 months, but your occupancy would drop, and then you may not have enough cash to operate. So you've got to keep that in mind. So you're looking at your lease renewals. You're trying to keep those staggered so you have a nice even flow. And when somebody comes up for lease renewal, as long as you got your occupancy where you want it, your budgeted occupancy, you have a renewal come up, you say, okay, well, we're going to increase your rent. You can move into one of these newly renovated units that we have available, or we can renovate yours, but this is the new rent. And they can decide whether they want to move into a new one, whether they want you to renovate theirs, or whether they don't want to pay the increase and move on. That decision to not pay the increase and move on is the reason why you want to keep an eye on your budgeted occupancy. Because if you're right there at your budgeted occupancy at 90%, and you could keep this person and that would help you, two in the hand, or one in the hand is better than two in the bush type mentality. So if you can keep them and maybe just increase them by $25 a month and do nothing to their apartment, it helps your occupancy level, your budgeted occupancy. So we're keeping that in mind as well. Great questions. I know this has been a lot of information in a short period of time. I knew it was going to be that way. So I'm trying to pack it all in. I'm going to go through a couple more questions, but we are getting close on our time here. How do you go about building as a whole, roof, parking lot, windows, et cetera? Any chance you can share this Excel sheet? So I think this question has to do with new construction. That's a whole different ball of wax. That's development. I do have a background in that. That takes a lot of work, and I have special software for that I pay about $2,000 a year for, and we put that to use. But I will mention one thing. This has come up multiple times. Is roofs. Somebody mentioned roofs, getting roofs replaced. when you're looking at a property for in due diligence, you're touring the property, maybe to put an LOI on it. Please, 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 please pay attention to the roof. You can do simple things like get a storm report for that area and see if there's been any hailstorms or windstorms that have come through the area since the seller has owned the property, and see if you can file a claim against their insurance company if there is damage to the roof. But if you're buying a property and they have 25-year shingles and they're 20 years old, your financing company, agency, bridge, or whatever is going to want to escrow money, almost guaranteed, to have those roofs replaced. And so, just because they're still working, there's no leaks, doesn't mean you're not going to have to replace those. And especially if you're going to hold it for 5 years, you got, again, a 25-year shingle, and they're 20 years old. In your 5 years, you're going to have to replace them but when you go to sell the property, their life expectancy is up, and you're going to have to factor that in. So make sure you pay attention to that. But using the insurance claim, I have had 2 roofs replaced for free, minus the deductible, using insurance on claims for properties. I was an insurance adjuster for 10 years, so I use that expertise to our advantage. Isn't totally important if we can reduce the water usage? Do you consider this? So I will touch on this. Water usage is bill back typically. So if they use more water, they're getting billed back. If you don't have it metered, then yeah, you may want to consider doing that. One thing I will mention is a lot of energy companies have programs to help you reduce costs. So in our neck of the woods, we went to our service provider, our power service provider, and they have a multifamily program. They came in and they replaced all the light bulbs with LED. They changed all the shower heads to low flow. They changed all the aerators. That's the little screen on your faucet. Changed all the aerators out to low flow and wrapped all the water heaters with insulation for a grand total of $0. Okay, so make sure you're checking out those things. There's also some private consultants that do that for you as well. Somebody asked for the cap rate impact on CapEx dollars to be put back up on the screen, so I'm going to do that really quick. So we got a couple more minutes. I'm going to scroll down through these questions. But here's the CapEx again. So somebody's asking, why are higher cap rates usually considered better? A cap rate, I'm just going to tell you how it is. A cap rate is just a measurement tool to tell you where you stand in the market. Okay. So in New York City, a 4.5 cap is a phenomenal deal, as is in Los Angeles. Okay. In there, it's like a 2% cap rate. Okay. So it's just a measurement. So you're looking at deals that sold and you're looking at what other people's cap rates were. Cap rate, just real quick, is NOI. So I'm gonna, it's just your factor of your NOI and your purchase price, which is giving your percentage of return. Okay. And that's all it is. And it's just a matter of, if this property is underperforming, but they want X purchase price, that gives me the cap rate. But I see other properties that sold in the market for a higher cap rate. So am I overpaying for this market? That would be the question. So it really just cap rate is just an indicator of the market. All right. I'm just going to read through these. Great questions. I'm sorry again that this has been I hope it wasn't overwhelming. I hope that you were able to get a lot of information out of this. This is something that I do on a regular basis, so it kind of comes naturally to you. I wish we could get our asset manager and our property managers on here, and we could spend 3-4 hours going on here, but we do have a lot of this content available on the MFIM platform, the education platform, our summits, our virtual summits that we have, we have a lot of these people speaking and giving this information. So, just keep taking notes and building on what you have. I know it's hard to get, you can't be comprehensive in 45 minutes to an hour on something like this, because this is a lifetime of experience built up here. But, hopefully this is added to your toolkit, some things on how to figure up what your CapEx budget is going to be. And just to kind of summarize again, I want to leave you with this. So start, if you're have a third party manager, start with them, get your comps, you verify the comps from what is provided. That gets you your rent matrix. Your rent matrix is going to show you what rent you can achieve. You want to try to be second or third in the market. That's going to tell you how much you can increase your rents per month. Then you're going to go down through and pick out your line items and which ones you can use to achieve that maximum rent increase and what your ROI is. At that point in time, you have your CapEx budget. Now you want to, it's a good idea to involve a designer at this point. Again, use professionals in the industry. They're much better at it because they do it all the time. I consider myself an amateur designer, but we still use designers, especially in clubhouses and different things like that. So, but here's one caveat is designers don't always look at the budget. So that's why you want to set the budget first and tell them this is what we have to work with. Okay. So, and these are the things we want: granite, cabinet, and they'll help. Oh, I think you should use this granite or this faucet or this, and it has to fit in that budget. So don't just go into a project saying, oh, wouldn't it be great? We could just make this look beautiful and everybody will just love it. Well, that's great in theory. But are people willing to pay for it? And one thing I'll leave you with too, when considering CapEx, especially big CapEx, properties are in a submarket, and everybody in that submarket knows that property. Even if let's say you're in Texas and you're buying in South Carolina, okay, and you're like, oh man, look at this thing's below rent, and we can come here and put granite and new flooring, and we can do all this stuff, and we can spend $2 million, and man, we're just going to push it. We're just going to reclass this, right? We're going to turn it from a C to a B. Well, the thing you have to remember is that neighborhood has a reputation, and yes, you can change the outside and you can change the tenant base, but it's going to take time for the submarket to recognize the change, or for the reputation of that property to change, your Google reviews to change. So factor that into your stabilization period when you're doing that. Because a lot of times what you're going to have to do is just empty the place out and build it back up with the tenant base that you want, that's able to achieve the rents that you want. So again, I'm sorry for the data dump here, and but I hope that you've enjoyed it. And we're be sure to join. Danny's going to be taking next week. I hope I'm not misspeaking there. We're filling in for Dan. He has a couple things going on the next couple of weeks, and so I was going to go over what Danny was going to go over, but I don't have that in front of me, so I apologize. But follow up with Danny. Danny is a spreadsheet wizard and a financial underwriting wizard. He loves that kind of stuff. I love this kind of stuff. So, but be sure to join him next week at the same time. And then I'll be on the following week, and I'm going to talk about the do's and don'ts of a value add program, and what should you use a contractor, should you use your third party manager to manage the project? Should you be the supplier? So be sure to check in for that in 2 weeks. So again, thank you all for joining us. And just remember to check out the MFIN platform, and I will see you next time.